Father, help us this morning to understand your truth, to rightly divide your truth, and to rightly apply your truth. God, help us to do it with wisdom. Let us do it with faith, with trust in you, and leaving the consequences to you. But God, help us to make the decisions that honor you in our lives. Let us choose truth, not lies. Let us choose holiness, not the hordes of this world. Lord, let us choose you and your truth. Father, let us choose to glorify you with how we walk and talk, with the decisions we make. And God, may we lift you high to a lost world, God. May we take what we need from this passage. And Lord, let us to take it into our hearts, live it out in our lives. We pray this in Christ's name. Amen. You be seated, and we're going to get right to it. And we're going to look at this morning verses 12 through 33. We probably won't read all those verses. We may read them all, but we certainly won't comment on all of them. But we're going to try to make our way through down to verse 33 of this chapter, beginning in verse 12 of chapter 26 of Genesis. And for just a moment, let me just say a few things about the first 11 verses of this chapter, because it bears on our understanding of what we're going to be thinking about this morning. But there is a famine that has come into the promised land, the Canaan land, as we sing about it. And because of that famine, Isaac has gone to a place called Gerar, and you'll see that in chapter 26, verse 1. This place is ruled by a Philistine king by the title, not the name we think, but goes by the title of Abimelech. And so that's really sets up most of it. But Isaac is afraid of the men in this region, and so when Isaac goes into this region of Gerar, he has his beautiful wife Rebekah with him, and he is afraid that they will kill him and take her. And so what does he do? He lies to Abimelech. He lies to the people, Isaac does, this believer, Isaac, and he lies to them and tells them that she is his sister. But unfortunately, our sins always find us out. We talked about that last week. So how Isaac is found out, according to chapter number 8 of this, or verse 8 of this chapter, Abimelech, the king, he looks out the window and he sees Isaac showing endearment to Rebekah, and then he confronts Isaac about his lie against him, Abimelech and his people. He does that in verses 9 through 10. And instead of Abimelech announcing judgment on Isaac and Rebekah, he tells the people this in verse number 11. You look down at it, it says, Abimelech charged all his people that he ruled over, saying, he that toucheth this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And that brings us to what we're looking at this morning. That's basically what's going on in those first 11 verses. But Isaac is about to get a lesson on how God is in control. That's what he's really about to get a lesson on. And that's why I wanted to go over the first 11 verses. And we're going to see this morning how God provides. Remember, Isaac left because there was a famine, but God provides. He told a lie because he wanted to protect himself, but God is the one who does the protecting. We're going to see that in these verses. And also, God keeps his promises. God had promised to bless Isaac in this land of Gerar. I think that's in verse number 3. He tells him that. He says if he'll stay there in Gerar and not go to Egypt, he'll bless him. But God keeps, and we're going to see how God keeps his promises. But had these things been kept in the mind of Isaac, we wouldn't even have the first 11 verses of this chapter, because he would have no reason to go to Gerar. He would have had no reason to tell that lie to the men at Gerar, and he would just been expecting God to provide what he needed in the land that he's in. And so that's what we're looking at. God provides, God protects, and God keeps his promises. And that's what Isaac's going to learn. And that's what you and I need to learn too in this world that we're in. We don't want to look to the government to protect us or provide for us, as many do. and I wouldn't want to look to them. You might need it today, but it might be 10 years before you get it. You know what I mean? I was reading of a soldier who had earned a Bronze Star, and back in World War II, he just got it just a little bit ago. I mean, just a month or so ago, he got this. You don't want to wait on that. But we don't have to wait on the provider that we have. We know he's going to provide, and he'll provide right on time every single time. So let's look down at these verses, and let's see how God teaches Isaac a lesson in verses 12 through 33, and teaches us some lessons at the same time. Teaches us about his providing, his protection, and his promises. But look at verse 12. Then Isaac sowed, and he's talking about seed. Perhaps this famine got Isaac to thinking, I better sow some seed, but that's what he does in verse 12. And look what he says. He sowed this seed in that land, in the land of Gerar, is what he's talking about, and received in the same year 100-fold. I want to try to put 100-fold into perspective for everybody, myself included, just as we go down through here. I want to see how God greatly blessed and provided for Isaac as he promised in verse number 3 that he would do when we get down to verse number 12. He said 100-fold. Let me put it to you this way. Many of you are gardeners and you know how that all works, but if you put out one tomato plant, you don't expect that many tomatoes. But let me tell you what happened to Isaac. It'd be like you putting out one tomato plant and getting the tomatoes of 100 tomato plants. That's exactly what happened to Isaac in the land. God blessed him 100-fold. God told him, I'm going to provide for you. And you know what? He did it. And he 100-fold. He gives him this. And it says on down in the verse, it says, and the Lord blessed him. Now you think about this with me for just a moment. Here's the question probably all of us are asking. You say, I thought you said Isaac lied. Yes, he did. Isaac lied to a king. Yes, he did. Isaac lied to Abimelech. And you say, well, how can God bless Isaac still after he did that? Well, I want you to hear this. God is going to keep his unconditional promises to his people. When you look up at verse number 3, all God asked Isaac to do is really nothing. He asked Isaac not to go down into Egypt. He told him to stay in the land. And he said, if you stay in the land, I will bless you. And that's what God is doing. It is an unconditional promise that God has given to Isaac. And God always fulfills his promise. Lest any of us should think I'm going to heaven because of the great sinless life I have lived. Listen, we've all sinned and we all ought to take care of those things in our life. We ought to try to get the power of God in our life to overcome that, live holy lives. But I'll tell you, when the bottom line is this, when I get ready to go to heaven, when I leave this world, it's not going to be because of the great life that I live. I'm like Adrian Rogers said. He said, I wouldn't trust the best 15 minutes of my life to get me into heaven. But I am trusting the blood of Jesus Christ and the unconditional promises that God made in the new covenant to get me there. Does God chasten us when we sin? Yes, he does. He disciplines his children when we sin. We talked about that last week. But when God has given us an unconditional promise, guess what? This great God is going to keep that promise. Amen. And that's exactly what he does for Isaac here. God will provide, and Isaac ended up in Gerar because of the famine, but God had promised him, and he takes care of that promise here in this verse. But you know what? I don't care what happens in life. You say, I've got all these great blessings, and Isaac had them. He was reaping 100-fold. I mean, he's got it. We're going to read more in verses 13 and 14 of how much God has blessed him. But how many knows anytime you get blessings, there's burdens that come with it. There's burdens that always comes with things. We'll talk, but let's think about that. But let's look at the burden of Isaac's blessing. Look at verse 13. And the man, talking about Isaac, waxed great and went forward and grew. And he means in wealth until he became very great. Verse 14. For he had possessions of flocks and possessions of herds and great stores of servants. Isaac has become a powerful man. He's already got things. We believe that his boys, Isaac's boys, Jacob and Esau, are back with Isaac's other things that he had before he came to Gerar. They're taking care of those things. God has brought Isaac to Gerar. He's ended up in Gerar, and God's blessed him in a multitude of ways there as well. But the next thing is the burden. And the Philistines envied him. I'll tell you, envy is the ugliest thing in this world. It says, what I have that God's blessed me with, somebody may look at it and say, you don't deserve it. And they're probably right on that, but God gave it anyway. But he says that they envied him. The Philistines had a couple of reasons, I believe, to envy Isaac. Number one, Isaac, the one that did the lying, he and Rebekah, she went along with it in the first 11 verses. But it's the people that are chasing for it, really. In verse 11, remember us reading that? If you touch these two, you're going to die, is what their king told them. And I think they had one reason to envy them. They had almost the apple of his eye outlook when it come to Abimelech. That he wasn't going to touch them. He wasn't going to allow them to be touched. And they had a reason to envy him. Also, you can think about them. Isaac put out his garden, we'll put it that way, and he reaped 100-fold. They were putting out their gardens, and they were not. And they envied Isaac because of these things. Why? What made the difference? God made the difference. Right. That's what made the difference. God did. These Philistines, we'll see this develop as we go down through here, but they didn't need, or they didn't have what Isaac had. And I know they had to be scratching their heads saying, I cannot believe he has reaped this way. Where are the gods, quote unquote? But the unfortunate thing is they didn't know the God that keeps the promises that Isaac knew. That was the problem. Look at the next verse, verse 15. 4. And this word 4, it says that they envied him up in verse number 14. But I want you to put this note in your Bible. They envied him in verse number 14. But when you get to the word 4 in verse 15, it's not telling us why they envied him. It's more of the sense of the word now. He's telling us what happened next. And I'm not telling you to replace that word. I'm just trying to, I'm not telling you to replace the word 4, but I'm telling you it's in the sense of now. He's telling us what happened next. He's not telling us why they envied him. He's just telling us what happened as we move on. Look at verse number 15. He says, for, in the sense of now, all the wells which his father's servants, talking about Isaac's father, Abraham, had digged in the days of Abraham his father. You all remember that Abraham was before a ruler that went by the title of Abimelech as well in chapter number 20. Well, while Abraham was there, he was told in chapter 20 verse 15, Abraham was, you go use my land. And apparently Abraham did that. And he went and dug wells. But listen to what these Philistines do. It says the Philistines had stopped them and filled them with earth. What would be a better way to get back at somebody that you envied than to do something like this to them in a land that's always needing water, to a man who has flocks and herds and servants, people that must have this water to survive. What do? Well, you stop their wells up. You keep them from getting this water. And so look at verse number 16. And Abimelech, the ruler that Isaac lied to, said unto Isaac, go from us, for thou art mightier than we. Abimelech sees that God has blessed him, but not only has God blessed him, he says that you're mightier than we are. Mightier than the Philistines is what he's telling him. I'll tell you what, nobody, I don't care how anti-Semitic they are, if you believe the Word of God, you cannot deny what a great power, what a great blessing that God has given to Israel over the years. What he has done with them. And he has done it here again through Isaac. Isaac went to this land and really has nothing but what he brought with him. And now the Philistine king has to say, you're mightier than we are. Here in about 400 years, and I'm talking about in the Bible, 400 years from where we're studying, Israel's going to end up in Egypt. And they're going to end up under a Pharaoh that didn't know Joseph. one of Jacob's sons, who takes a rulership there in Egypt. And here's what that Pharaoh is going to say about Israel. Much what Abimelech says about him here. But this is in Exodus chapter 1 and verse number 9. And he, the Pharaoh, said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. These are the slaves. These are the people that ought to have been under their thumb. These are the people that came to Egypt to take refuge, Israel. Because remember, there was another famine, and God gave Jacob and his family permission to go to Egypt. And now they're down there, and the Pharaoh says, Israel are more and mightier than we. Then what did they start doing? They started killing their babies. Or wanting to. Anyways, but you can't stop God. You know what, though? Here's what I always think when I read passages like we're reading in Genesis 26. And you ought to put this in your memory, put this in the notes of your Bible. What if Abimelech would have blessed Isaac instead of throwing him out, trying to get him out of his land? Here's what I believe would have happened. Genesis 12:3. Here's what it says. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curseth thee. And in thee shall all the families of the earth be blessed. That's what Genesis 12, what God promises to Abraham. I'll curse them that curse you. I'll bless them that bless you. What would have happened if Abimelech would have said, God's with you, no doubt. Let me turn from my gods and serve your God and bless you. What would have happened? I believe he would have needed those wells he filled in. Abimelech filled those wells in because he didn't need them. He wasn't reaping 100-fold because he didn't have God on his side. Listen to this. Look at verse 17. Isaac leaves the capital, and Isaac departed thence. They filled his wells. He leaves the capital of Gerar. And it says he pitched his tent in the valley of Gerar and dwelt there. You know, sometimes when you don't get along with people, you know what the best thing to do is? Leave. You know, we often talk about around our house even. Romans 12:18, it says, if it be possible, as much as lieth in you, live peaceably with all men. But I'll tell you, sometimes peace is only found with separation, and then some people just don't want peace. And some people just love an uproar. They're called gossips in the Bible. Isaac had become greater. Isaac had become mightier than the Philistines. Here's what I always thought when I was reading this. Why didn't he fight? Why didn't he put a thumping on them? Instead of them running him out and him going into the valley, why didn't he lay a whipping on them and run them into the valley? You say, why didn't he? I have no idea why he didn't. He was mightier than them, but he didn't do it. I don't know if perhaps Isaac chose not to because of the grief he caused them. It's a possibility. I don't know, though. Perhaps this is a way of God's disciplining Isaac with his sin that he committed, making him roam around from here to there. But I want you to notice verse 18. The burden continues, and Isaac digged again the wells of water which they had digged in the days of Abraham his father. So he unstocks the wells that are in this valley that his father had dug. For the Philistines had stopped them after the death of Abraham. Obviously, they did not need them. And he called their names after the names, talking about the wells, and at the end of that verse, and he called there, which is referring to the wells, he called their names after the names by which his father had called them. Verse 19, and Isaac's servants digged in the valley and found there a well of springing water. You think about what a valuable thing this would have been. I don't think much about it. You may not think much about it. We have those pitchers that filter your water, Brita filters. We have those at the house. You know, I got up this morning, I made coffee, and I went over to the sink and I refilled mine. No problem, right? I do that. I did that. Well, I do that every morning. If Amanda doesn't beat me in there to do it. But we do it every morning. We go over to the sink and we fill it up. But you think about them. They would go to a well and they'd have to draw water out of that well, like the lady that met with Jesus. She said she told Jesus you don't have anything to draw with. But you would think about this kind of well that they found. It's an artesian well. It was springing up. And guess what? They wanted it. Does Isaac fight for it? He doesn't. But look what it says. It says that they found this well, and the water was gushing out of it. It was an artesian springing well. Verse 20, and the herdmen of Gerar did strive with Isaac's herdmen, saying, the water is ours. And he called the name of the well Esek. And what a name for a well, but it means the quarrel well. Your study Bible may have another name in it, but I want you to understand this with me. We say that was the name of this well, but we don't have to depend on some lexicon or biblical dictionary to know what that means. The Bible tells us after the semicolon what Esek means. It means because they strove with them. That's why he named that well what he named it. Because they were striving with Isaac and his herdmen over this water. Verse 21, and they digged another well and strove for that also. So they dug that one. That became an artesian well. They dug another one, and they got in a fight over that one as well. Can you see the lesson of Isaac here? He fled his land because of the famine. And he is leaving and going from place to place before Abimelech, seemingly wanting to have peace with him. But what has God done in every place Isaac has settled in that land? He's provided him one of the greatest commodities in that area today and in that area at that time, and that's water.
That's right.
Every single time. Can you see the picture of developing in the believer's mind, in Isaac's mind? I left because of the famine, and here God has provided everywhere. Even when I've given them up, God has took me to another place and given me more water. He provides, doesn't he? You think Isaac is starting to get the picture of this in his mind? I'll tell you, sometimes I'm hard-headed. Ask Amanda. Ask some of you that's been in meetings with me. It's hard. I get hard-headed. I want to tell you this. God is gracious to teach us. And I'll tell you, he's teaching Isaac here. Isaac, I'll provide for you.
That's right.
You trust me. I'll provide for you. Instead of running to the world and trusting the world, trust me, Isaac. I'll provide for you. And so they strove for this other well in verse 21, other than the artesian well of verse 19. What did he call that well? If you look down at verse 21, the end of it, he says that he called the name of it, the well, Sitnah, hatred well. I tell you what, it's not a place you want to move into, doesn't sound like it. But look at verse 22. Again, the blessing. And it says, and he, verse 22, talking about Isaac, removed from thence. He leaves again. He moves further up the valley of Gerar and digged another well. And for that well, they strove not. Well, he's finally found one they're not going to fight with him over. And he called the name of it Rehoboth, the well of ample room. He finally found a place that he could settle down. Once again, we don't have to go on the lexicon. We don't have to go on the Bible dictionary of what the name of this well means. Look after the semicolon. And he said, for now the Lord hath made room for us. We know what it means. Rehoboth, because the Bible tells us. And he says, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Do you hear the change in Isaac's attitude there? He's went from fleeing because of famine. Read verse 22 at the very end again after the comma. At the very end. May God help us to say the same thing. May God help us to be able to learn the lessons from our past sins. We've repented of them. We've confessed them as sin. Let us learn the lesson from those sins. And I believe Isaac is doing that. He says at the end of verse 22, and we shall be fruitful in the land. Now Isaac moves to a different area. You say he's in Gerar. Now he's going to move to another area, very near there, but not in the same area. But he says in verse 23, it's in the same area, but not the same place. And he went up from thence to Beersheba. You put that memory in your mind of Beersheba. As you read through your Bible this year, you'll see it over and over and over and over again. I just read about it just the other day in my Bible, daily Bible. Look at verse 24. And the Lord appeared unto him the same night and said, I love this right here. I am the God of Abraham thy father. Fear not. Remember, you know why Isaac lied to Abimelech in this chapter? He was afraid of the people. And notice what he says. For I am with thee, and will bless thee, and multiply thy seed for my servant Abraham's sake. Can you imagine how worn down Isaac was? He's moved his massive operation, I'm going to call it. His family, his herds, his flocks, the servants, time and time again. And he keeps moving and he keeps moving, ends up in Beersheba. And Isaac, I'm sure he needed this when it came. And the Lord comes to us when we need it. I'll tell you, I don't want that to sound like some Yahoo statement. You read the Word of God, and He'll remind you of those great promises when you need them. That's right. He'll send somebody to you that knows the Word of God that'll help you in these days. He just may bless your prayer time like you've just never had to bless it before in your life. He may bless your time in the Word of God like He's never blessed it before in your life. The Lord comes to us with His assuring word just as we need it. Look at the fifth thing. Sometimes what we have or what we don't have will show our spiritual priorities. I want you to notice what Isaac had. Not what he could have had. He's mightier than the Philistine king. You know that the Philistine king lived in a great palace. You know that the Philistine king had servants that served him every day. And great lands and masses of people wanting to be in his presence. But Isaac, I want you to show you what he has. Look at verse 25. The Bible tells us in verse 25, and he built an altar there and called upon the name of the Lord. What's the next thing that Isaac has? He has a tent and pitched his tent there. Now, is this, I don't know if this is why Isaac didn't fight. I'm really not sure. Perhaps this is why he didn't fight. Because Isaac has a tent. Do you know why? Because Isaac knows something about himself that only the person who knows God knows. He's a pilgrim in this world. Everybody's trying to set up their riches in this world. That's what Abimelech was doing. Isaac was rich in this world, but his greatest riches wasn't in this world. That's why he had a tent. And when he had his altar, do you know what that meant? This is before the tabernacle. This is before the temple. That the leader of the home would set up an altar, and there he'd worship God with his family. He let the people know, I have an altar. I worship the God of heaven. He said, I have a tent. Even though I have great riches, I have a tent. You know why? Because I'm a pilgrim. Somebody said this about a pilgrim. What is a pilgrim? This person says a fugitive is fleeing from home. That's a fugitive. A vagabond has no home. A stranger is away from home. But a pilgrim is headed home. And that's Isaac. Isaac was headed home. The tent identified Isaac as a pilgrim, and the altar announced him as a worshiper of Jehovah, and that he was headed to heaven. I often think, what do I have about me that says I'm headed home? I don't want to confuse this verse. He's absolutely talking to Isaac and things, but what do I have that marks I'm headed home? I have the gospel. And I'll tell you what, I'm headed home. I'm not there yet. And I want as many as can to go with me.
Amen.
I'm headed home. I've got a house at 155 Margaret Lane, but I'll tell you, my home's in heaven.
Amen.
I'm headed home. I've not set my roots down here. Who knows what will happen to that home? I've talked to many people who have gotten sick beyond all, and they've had to leave their homes that they've had all their lives. They've ended up in a nursing home, or perhaps they had a family member they've ended up with. But I'll tell you this, either way, it still isn't my home. May I keep that in my mind as those days approach. If they do approach, but I'm not home. I'm headed home. I'm a pilgrim. I'm a pilgrim. Oh my. I want to just read the last. I'm going to read something, say something to you, then I'm just going to basically read verses 26 through 33, just so we can be that far for next time. Isaac has made enemies out of Abimelech and his people. One for a reason, out of one eye you see a reason, out of the other you don't. Out of one way he lied to them, and the other way they just didn't like him because God had blessed him. But let me tell you what Isaac has done by moving along as he dug those wells and God providing another well. He's done what Proverbs 16:7 says. Here's what Proverbs 16:7 says. When the ways of a man pleases the Lord, he maketh even his enemies to be at peace with him. And here they're going to come, Abimelech and his people, and they're going to want peace with Isaac and make a covenant with Isaac to have peace. And here it is. Look at verse 26 through 33. Then Abimelech went to him from Gerar, and Hauzeth, one of his friends, and Phicol, the chief priest of his army, went with Abimelech. And Isaac said unto him, Wherefore come ye to me, seeing ye hate me, and have sent me away from you? And they said, We saw certainly that the Lord was with thee. And we said, Let there be now an oath betwixt us, even betwixt us and thee, and let us make a covenant with thee, that thou wilt do us no hurt. He had the ability to hurt him, right? And we have not touched thee. And as we have done unto thee nothing but good, which I don't believe is a true statement at all to you, they kept running him off, and have sent thee away in peace, thou art now the blessed of the Lord. And he made them a feast, Isaac did, and they did eat and drink. And they rose up betimes in the morning, and swore one to another, and Isaac sent them away after they'd all woken up the next morning. And they departed from thence in peace, verse 32. And it came to pass the same day that Isaac's servants came, and told him concerning the well which they had digged, and said unto him, We have found water again. And he called it Sheba. Beersheba is going to be the name of the place, but Sheba is the name of the well. And it's the well of the oath. And here's what they call the well. Therefore the name of the city, or the name of the city, is Beersheba unto this day. As Alice comes to the piano, here's the point for Isaac. And here's the point for us. Isaac lived as he should, and the rest fell into place. You think about that. Isaac lived as he should, honoring God, trusting God, learning God's lessons in verses 12 through 33. And God blessed him. He didn't have to have no scheming, no lying. And God gave him great strength. God gave him great supplies. And eventually peace. I'll tell you this. Here's the title of the message. I don't think I gave it at the beginning. There is no substitute for trusting the Lord.
Amen.
There's no substitute for trusting the Lord. Let me ask you this morning. Are you here and know you're saved? I'll tell you what, these ridiculous answers that people in our county give to why they're going to heaven, they're just that. They're just ridiculous. I'm asking you, do you know Jesus Christ as your personal Savior? You're not trusting anything but the trust that you have placed upon Christ and his work at Calvary for your sinfulness. You're trusting anything else, or that's the message that you didn't know about, you're lost. You need Christ as your Savior. Trust Christ as your Savior. Believers, this morning, let us trust him. Do we think the world's going to get better? Will the economy recover? It may. It may drop again. Who knows? Is our health going to get better? Well, as we get older, that's highly unlikely. But I want to tell you this. There's no substitute for trusting the Lord.
That's right.
Nothing has taken us that has not happened many, many times before. Our God will take care of us. You stand with me. As she plays, you pray.